Valentin Barco appears to be just on the cusp of making the Chelsea move official. Lots of sources coming out and reporting that Valentin Barco is basically going to agree the deal. It's felt pretty nailed on for a while, even as far back as the January window, and we were linked with him. We've been linked with him for a long time. Do you know what I mean? He's been having a good time out in Strasbourg, a really, really important player for that team, and it looks like he's going to make the move to Stamford Bridge. So with him coming in, and with a lot of the noise at the moment still centred around Enzo Fernandez in particular, I wanted to compare the two players together and have a little look at their league stats this season so we can see kind of what we might be looking at in terms of a Valentin Barco versus what we've got or may not have in the future with Enzo Fernandez. Welcome, Blue Believers, to another episode of the Stamford Sync, where we are syncing up with everything Chelsea FC. And we got a little bit of good feeling back, didn't we? After the Port Vale result, it's been a good FA Cup weekend. You know, I'll quickly cover that, do you know what I mean, just before we dive into the comparison. But obviously, we beat Port Vale 7-0. Esteval, man of the match. Yoro Hato, absolute banger. Things are looking pretty rosy from the Chelsea side, albeit against relegation fodder League One opposition Port Vale. Don't get me wrong, I understand we've got two very, very difficult games in front of us, but it was nice. And watching Arsenal bottle it to Southampton and reduce another one of their trophy chances this season was magnificent. Guys, if you enjoyed Arsenal getting absolutely smashed by Southampton, subscribe to the channel and like the video because we're just going to have some fun with it. But guys, let's get into the meat of today's video. And first things first, before we dive into the stats, I'm going to talk about this post from Fabrizio Romano. Valentin Barco has said yes to Chelsea move. Personal terms agreed ahead of potential move this summer. Colo Barco wants CFC and it's all set on the player side. Up to Chelsea if/when they want to proceed, in total control of the deal being at Strasbourg. So it's not a here we go, but Fabi Rom is coming out saying that things are close. So therefore you would surmise that, yeah, this feels like the worst kept secret ever, doesn't it? And I'm not going to lie to you, personally, I think Valentin Barco looks like a good player. I think he offers us something very different from what we've got at the moment, which is important. As we'll get into with the statistical comparisons in a minute, his creative stats seem to really outshine his goal scoring ones. Some people are worried about him not being physical enough for the Premier League, but he did, you know, he had a brief cameo playing at Brighton before he moved to Strasbourg, and ultimately I think he's just gone from strength to strength, and he's still only 21, so his career trajectory thus far has been impressive. But let's get into the comparison. So, Enzo Fernandez versus Valentin Barco, let's have a look. So this is the general and the heat maps. Now, the heat maps I always find quite fascinating, and these ones are, again, never let me down the heat maps, these ones are interesting too. So, Enzo Fernandez on the left, Barco on the right, that will be the same for the rest of the slides I'm going to show. Enzo Fernandez, 25 years old, Valentin Barco 21, which is the age we got Enzo Fernandez at originally. Height 177 centimeters and Barco at 5 centimeters less at 172, so he is a little bit shorter. Enzo Fernandez already not a particularly tall guy, so with Barco we are looking at a particularly diminutive player. Market value 87 million euros to 27 mil from Barco. Now I don't really put too much stock in these, to be honest, because this is, you know, very, very different by website, and Enzo Fernandez is not going to go. 87 million euros is like 75 million quid. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's not going to be like that, is it? And Barco probably worth a little bit more than that, but because of the Blueco link, we will probably only pay what his book value is, which is interesting. Obviously, Chelsea for Fernandez at the moment, RC Strasbourg for Barco this season, and the first really interesting thing we see that is Enzo Fernandez this season has achieved a 7.12 rating on SofaScore with his amalgamated statistics, and Barco has received a 7.15. So, caveats, right? Caveats before we get into the heat maps and the rest of the stats. Barco plays in Liga, and Enzo Fernandez plays in the Premier League. So there is going to be, like, it is more impressive what Enzo Fernandez can do in the Premier League versus what Barco could do in the French League. You would surmise that if Enzo Fernandez went into Liga, and he would have a very good time. You would have thought, anyway, you would have thought. Talk to me about that in the comments if you disagree, but I think the strength of the Premier League outshines that of Liga. So, you know, that is, yeah, and it's difficult to put that into, you know, tangible kind of readings when ultimately we're just comparing the raw statistics, but that is just a caveat, and there is another caveat that I'll get onto in a minute. But before we do that, let's look at the heat maps. So, what we're seeing is similar. It's definitely similar. They are both obviously central midfielders that largely seem to favour the left side. Now with Fernandez, that seems largely concentrated in the left half space, just as you're leading up to the goal, right? So he's looking at getting in there to get into scoring positions and creating chances and stuff. Valentin Barco, albeit the heat maps are similar, Valentin Barco seems to be getting further back and further up, essentially. And, you know, definitely a lot more, almost like a byline kind of option. Now that's interesting because Valentin Barco was actually a left back before he was converted into a central midfielder. But ultimately, Valentin Barco's heat map is a little bit more sparse because I think he's probably played less games than Enzo Fernandez has, but we will confirm that in a minute. But either way, we're looking at similar players, but with Enzo Fernandez kind of being a lot more concentrated in that left half space, the half pocket in front of the goal, and Valentin Barco spending a lot of time there. Like, that is a big concentration of red he's got there, but he defends a lot in the centre of the pitch as well, which is good, and ultimately spends more time getting on the byline. So we're looking at similar players, but their heat maps would dictate that they do slightly different things within the very similar role that they're asked to play. Right, so this is where we start getting into the league stats, and it is just for the leagues this season because SofaScore doesn't let you compare amalgamated season stats for a player for some reason, so we just go through the league stats, but I still think it's a relatively good indication. So again, Enzo Fernandez on the left and Valentin Barco on the right. In the league, Enzo Fernandez has played 30 matches and Valentin Barco has played 25. So that is the other caveat, right? Obviously, I mentioned about the Liga and Premier League caveat before. This is the other caveat. Enzo Fernandez has played 5 more games than Valentin Barco has, and that is kind of represented in the total minutes as well. I'm going back to us because it seems to just make more sense. But yeah, the minutes per game, 86 to Enzo Fernandez, 81 for Valentin Barco. So he's playing a few less games, not spending quite as much time on the pitch. So that caveat benefits and is a drawback for both of them in several reasons, and we will get into that why. So attacking stats, and what you can see already is Enzo Fernandez, for the most part, absolutely smashing the attacking stats. And Enzo Fernandez has been one of our most productive players in terms of numbers this season, right? So, you know, that kind of makes sense. Enzo Fernandez, 8 goals in the Premier League. That's a great return for a central midfielder, and he has had a good season in that respect. Goals, 1 for Valentin Barco. So evidently, shooting boots aren't necessarily his thing. Expected goals, which again, this is even more important than the goal return thing, really, the expected goals, because it tells you much more about what you can expect from the player. Enzo Fernandez's expected for goals is 10.42, which is technically he's underperformed that, so he is expected to have scored 2 more goals than he has. The best players outperform their XG. Valentin Barco also underperforming his XG with an XG of 2.15. Now, what if you just look at the goals, you'd be like, oh, Enzo Fernandez is much better because he's scoring loads more goals than Valentin Barco. But what the XG tells you is that Valentin Barco is not getting into goal-scoring positions. It is not something that he's really looking to do very often, and that is backed up later with the stats as well. So I do think that's very interesting because he is an advanced player and he does play in very similar positions to Enzo Fernandez, but he's not looking to score goals as much, and he seems to be mostly focusing on work rate and creativity. Goals per game, 0.3, 0.0. So I don't know, actually, because Valentin Barco has scored 1 goal, so I don't know why it's 0 there, but it is what it is. Obviously, Enzo Fernandez in front of that one. Shots off target, 0.6 per game with 0.3 for Valentin Barco. Shots on target, 0.9 to 0.3 again from Valentin Barco. Big chances missed. Enzo Fernandez has missed 8 and Valentin Barco has only missed 3. So although that seems to be a plus for Valentin Barco, at the end of the day, he's taking significantly less shots. So I would not really say that is a negative for Enzo Fernandez and a positive for Valentin Barco. It just makes sense because Enzo Fernandez is spending so much more time trying to get into shooting positions. And what we know with Enzo Fernandez sometimes is he will just be on the edge of the box and he'll try and pop one in from outside, won't he? So the attacking stats obviously favour Enzo Fernandez in terms of goal-scoring ability, right? And Enzo Fernandez is a goal-scoring midfielder, and it looks like Valentin Barco is not that. So already, I think that's quite interesting. But we will move on to the passes. This is where things start to get a little bit more interesting for me personally. So Enzo Fernandez, 3 assists, and Valentin Barco with 4. Now, Valentin Barco has got 9 assists across all the season, by the way, and I think Enzo Fernandez has only got a few more than that. So what that already tells you, Valentin Barco, in less games, with obviously a less attacking position, has managed to get more assists. That seems to be kind of his bread and butter, is providing opportunities for other players, which is going to be great for the likes of Estevan Willian, Cole Palmer, João Pedro, do you know what I mean? I like a midfielder that's a creative midfielder. My favourite Chelsea midfielder, albeit controversially, is Cesc Fabregas. Don't get me wrong, obviously I absolutely love Frank Lampard and he is a club legend and watching him play was marvellous, but at the same time I loved the wizardry about Cesc Fabregas. Now, am I saying Barco is going to be that good? Absolutely not. But what I am saying is I appreciate a midfielder who can provide for his teammates and help out our attackers, right? So, assists per game, 0.1 to 0.2 for Valentin Barco, so Valentin Barco wins on that one. Expected assists, 5.97 for Enzo Fernandez, 6.3. So even the expected assists, albeit he's done it in 5 less games and a lot less game time, Valentin Barco is outstripping him on that. So what this is saying is, like I say, it's just showing us how different his role is and the type of player that he is. He's a much more creative player than Enzo Fernandez is in general in terms of trying to provide for his teammates. Big chances created, another good one, 10 for Enzo Fernandez, 13 for Valentin Barco. Long balls, 2.4 per game with a 58% accuracy and 2.6 per game for Valentin Barco with a 57.1% accuracy. So he is attempting slightly more long balls per game. This one's really interesting, and this is where the fullback kind of thing comes in, and the fact that Valentin Barco is left-footed as well. Crosses, 0.3 per game for Enzo Fernandez. He doesn't cross very often. 1.1 per game with a 27% accuracy for Valentin Barco. So I haven't watched Valentin Barco's highlight reel, and I don't know how many of those assists are coming from crosses, but you would have thought that that's the fullback in him, right? And we see something from Marc Cucurella quite often when he used to drift into midfield as well. I get similar sort of vibes, to be honest. Valentin Barco seems like a more permanent midfield position of what Marc Cucurella looked like when he was in that midfield position. So before we get into defending, just to kind of note what we've seen so far with attacking and the passing and the creative stats, obviously Enzo Fernandez smashed all of the attacking stats, but Valentin Barco is in front of all of the passing stats as per SofaScore. So I just think, like I say, that tells us exactly the difference in the kind of player that we're getting, and bearing in mind that Liam Rosenior has obviously worked with Valentin Barco a lot before, that's obviously something he wants in his team. So, defending. Interceptions, 0.6 per game for Enzo Fernandez to 0.5 for Valentin Barco. Similar, but Enzo Fernandez outstrips that and does look to be a little bit more physical, let's be completely honest. But tackles, 1.6 per game for Enzo Fernandez, 2.1 for Valentin Barco. So, diminutive as he may be, he is getting stuck in. Dribbled past, 1 time per game for Enzo Fernandez, 0.5 for Valentin Barco. Again, that is good, but these are the stats where you start to think a little bit more. This is the Liga, Premier League difference. Like, will Valentin Barco be able to maintain these kind of defending stats in the Premier League? That would be interesting to see. Clearances, 0.9 for Enzo Fernandez, 0.4 for Valentin Barco, so he's not spending that much time, and he's a small diminutive player, so that kind of makes sense. Block shots, 0 apiece. So even Stevens for the defending. They're both better at defending in different ways in this respect. Enzo Fernandez is more astute at interceptions. Valentin Barco is better at tackles and not being dribbled past, and Enzo Fernandez is at the back making more clearances. So again, they just kind of speak to two kind of different players, regardless of a very similar position that they play. And moving on, we will get to the last couple of parts, and that is the other section and the cards, the disciplinary stuff, right? So the other stats, successful dribbles per game, 0.4 for Enzo Fernandez, 0.9 for Valentin Barco. So again, you can see already, like, he spends more time on the left on the byline, as we looked at in his heat map earlier, so that totally makes sense. Ground duels, 3.3 per game for Enzo Fernandez and 5.3 for Valentin Barco, so that is impressive. He is winning the ball back, which is good. We like that. Aerial duels, 0.8 with a 50% accuracy to 0.3 for Valentin Barco. That completely speaks to the whole conversation, the narrative surrounding the physical nature of the Premier League, and obviously Barco being a bit more of a diminutive player. Are we going to miss that, though? Is Enzo Fernandez's aerial duels like a big, or do we expect more of that from our defenders? Do you know what I mean? I'll be interested to see what you think about that in the comments. Let me know. Fouls, 1 per game for Enzo Fernandez, 0.9 for Valentin Barco. So that is, a very small difference at the end of the day, although Barco does come out on top. Was fouled 1.3 times per game. Valentin Barco, 2.3 times per game. And that probably speaks to the dribble stat being so much higher as well. Do you know what I mean? It seems like Valentin Barco is probably making a bit more of a nuisance of himself with the ball than Enzo Fernandez is. So that's a good thing as well. If he's getting fouled a lot, then that means that people are targeting him a lot, which is good. And we'll just wrap up on the cards. 8 yellow cards for Enzo Fernandez in the Premier League this season. 5 in Liga for Valentin Barco, which is good. 0 yellow to red cards for either, so neither of them have got 2 yellows in one game. But Valentin Barco has got 1 red card this season, and Enzo Fernandez has none. Now, we don't need more players in the team that are getting red carded all the time, do we? But at the end of the day, again, there's a bit of a balance there, isn't there? Valentin Barco, yes, he's younger than Enzo Fernandez, so maybe he's got a little bit more to learn in terms of temperament, and that will be super important in the Premier League, as we've seen this season, because everyone's been sent off at some point. But ultimately, the way he plays his game, he's been getting less yellow cards in general. So that's it. That is the general statistical comparison of what we're looking at, the difference between Enzo Fernandez and Valentin Barco. So the interesting thing is, obviously, there's always a question like who's better than the other. Kind of inarguably at the moment, obviously Enzo Fernandez is a better player. He has more high-level experience. He is a World Cup winner. He, has won trophies with Chelsea, obviously the Conference League, the Club World Cup. He's been really important for us this season. He scores really important goals. But does he fit the system? This is the question that I've been asking since we bought him, basically, and seeing him under Enzo Maresca, seeing him under Liam Rosenior. Does he fit the kind of system. Like, my thing with Enzo Fernandez, and I've mentioned it a few times on this channel already, is I think he's got a little bit of a positional identity crisis, right? We're playing him in the 10 at the moment. Liam Rosenior is playing him a lot in the 10 at the moment, and that seems to be out of necessity rather than because it's actually what we want to do. But he does get played in the 6. It made sense when it's the number 8. It kind of got made sense more with Maresca, because Enzo Fernandez would start deeper, but we would have a Malagusto, a Reece James, or a Marc Cucurella that would invert into midfield to partner Moises Caicedo, which allowed Enzo Fernandez to get more forward. That kind of seemed to be his best position. But Liam Rosenior doesn't do that. So we're not seeing the same Enzo Fernandez as we did before. And personally, I prefer seeing Cole Palmer in the centre of attack right now. What I don't think we're going to see is Valentino coming and playing in the 10. Do you know what I mean? Valentin Barco, playing in the 10 all the time. I think he's coming in to be a partner to Moises Caicedo in midfield. And I think he offers a lot of athleticism, a lot of running, and a lot of creativity, which is really, really, really good as well. I think that's something we've been missing in our midfield for quite a long time now. Someone that's looking for a pass, someone that's looking for a teammate to get the ball to. We've got so many good attacking players, right? You know, João Pedro, Cole Palmer, and Esteval Willian. Who knows who we're going to bring in the summer? Hopefully someone good. And at the end of the day, Valentin Barco looks to be a bit more of a provider, which I think we've been missing. There will always be questions over the diminutive stature, like only time will tell. Do you know what I mean? At the end of the day, Esteval Willian was diminutive when he came in. He's built up a little bit and gotten used to the rigours of the Premier League. Obviously, absolutely smashed it in the Port Vale game the other day and has had generally quite a good season. So it's not impossible to think that Valentin Barco could do the same. How much warming up time will he need? I don't know. There's some interesting factors already, isn't there? Like, if Mike Penders comes back, that's a teammate that he knows well. Omega's coming in next season. That's a teammate that he knows well. Andre Santos is already here. Mamadou Sarr's already here. Those are teammates that he knows well. And obviously, he spent a lot of time playing for Liam Rosenior already. So as far as a culture shift goes, he's been in the Premier League before, obviously, because he spent some time at Brighton. He's played under our current manager. He's played with a lot of the players that are going to be here next season. So it's not going to be a massive culture shift. So you would have thought that means he would be able to bed in easily. Now, does this nail on that Enzo Fernandez is going to get sold? Absolutely not, because there are rumours circulating today that Chelsea do still want to offer Enzo Fernandez a new contract despite all of the rigmarole that's been going on. And what that might look like is, if we do end up offering him another contract, that was all he wanted in the first place, right? At the end of the day, you know, he sees some of the other guys in the squad getting paid more than him, and he's like, I want a little bit more of that cash money, so stick around, please. So my thing with Enzo Fernandez, I've said it before, I'll say it again, I'm relatively indifferent. I will not be absolutely devastated if he goes, but I'll also be happy to keep him because, you know, the numbers that he's putting out are really, really good. But personally, I think Valentin Barco is not a better player, but I think he looks like he fits the system more. And I feel similar with, like, Romeo Lavia, for instance. Do you know what I mean? Is Romeo Lavia a better player than Enzo Fernandez? Obviously not, because for a start, he can barely stay fit. But when he's playing well, does he look like he fits the system a bit better? Yes, I think so, because I think we need a bit more from our deeper midfield. I think Enzo Fernandez is too much of a forward-thinking player. I think he's a real box-to-box kind of thing, and we don't necessarily need or use that at the moment. And I think Valentin Barco looks like he's going to fit a quite specific need a little bit more. And like I say, for me, the creative stuff is really important. I want to see, like, for instance, one of the things I love about Romeo Lavia, line-splitting passes, right? I want to see line-splitting passes. I want to see crosses going into attacking players that are in the box, not from attacking players like that are outside of the box, going into no one, which is what we see a lot of the time. So, guys, let me know what you think about this situation now. Like I say, it doesn't necessarily mean that Enzo Fernandez is going to go, but how do you like the look of Valentin Barco? Have you checked out his highlight reel? Did you see him while he was at Brighton? Like, let me know what you think about Valentin Barco. One way or the other, I think he adds something interesting to the squad. Whether he's going to get straight into the first team, only time will tell. But like I say, with Liam Rosenior and the culture of a lot of Strasbourg players being already there and players that he's played with, I think he will settle in quite quickly. And yeah, obviously he's been in the Premier League already. So guys, that is it. I'm going to wrap up the video there, but thank you very much for sticking around until the end. If you did, I will catch up with you all very, very soon. Take it easy. Peace.